Hey guys, it's Chris, the Natural Progressive, and I'm very pleased to have with me someone who actually needs no introduction, climate science system scientist Paul Beckwith. Welcome to the show. There's so much to talk about, a lot to talk about. So I'm really, really happy that you joined me today. Everybody here already knows your name, and they know who you are and watch your channel religiously, I'm pretty sure. So thank you and welcome. Say hi and we'll get
Yeah,
into it.
thanks. I'm sure we'll have a very interesting conversation. A few things to talk about today, right?
Oh, absolutely. Feel free to be yourself. If you feel like cussing, I think the situation warrants it. Don't hold back. Just be who you are. And I know I might throw out a swear word here and there. First off, I want to thank Poppy Davis while I'm here. Poppy Davis generously donated to my channel and really appreciate it, Poppy. I need it because I am in quarantine right now. So don't know if I'm going to get paid. So Paul, let's start off with something that a lot of people are wondering about with this coronavirus, the global dimming, and you've talked a lot about that on your show. The effect, how much of an effect the global dimming, the lack of aerosol effect in the atmosphere, is that a huge factor? Or are there other um, effects from this that matter more? What are you seeing? What are you feeling? And yeah, let's just start there.
Yeah. So this is a one of these unintended experiments that we can learn an awful lot about. Hopefully, in the next few weeks to few months, we can pin down, the size of the global dimming effect. So essentially, industry, they're not just pumping out their greenhouse gas emissions, but they produce a lot of particles. For example, sulfur dioxides and black carbon. And the properties of these aerosols affects the climate significantly. I'll remind people, when a large volcano goes off, it puts up sulfur dioxide into the upper atmosphere, the stratosphere, above the weather, so it's not rained out quickly. So it can be up there for several years, and it can cool the planet. So Mount Pinatubo cooled the globe about 0.6 degrees Celsius, about a degree Fahrenheit almost, for several years. So the aerosols from industry, they're being produced all the time. Most of them are in the lower atmosphere, and they're rained out within about a week. And how large is the effect? The most common number is 0.5 degrees Celsius. That's the most common number in science, but we don't really know for sure. There's a range. It could be between 0.25 degrees Celsius and 1.1 degrees Celsius is what the best, what the most popular scientific consensus is. So let's say it's half a degree, and if we shut down a quarter of global industry, then you would expect that we'd have a temperature rise almost within a week or two of a quarter of the 0.5, which would be 0.125 degrees Celsius warming. Now, this would be doubled or tripled over land, and it would be very, very high over the countries that were producing the emissions and shrouded themselves with this aerosol covering. It would be less over the oceans. That number could be, 1 degree Celsius. So a quarter of 1 degree is 0.25 Celsius. So we should be able to get a decent handle on that number when we know how much of global industry has been shuttered, the temperatures that we measure. I mean, it's hard to do it without a statistical study of the temperatures because, the jet streams are very messed up. There's a lot of temperature anomalies around the planet. We should get a better idea as to what that number will be from the global shutdown that's ongoing.
And how much can we actually take? And then, okay, after this, I'm going to take questions from our chat who have finally showed up. Probably Kevin from Black Bear News is done. So,
yeah. Okay. Just to put that in perspective, the global temperature, we're rising about 0.2 Celsius per decade. So if it's 0.25, that's at least 10, 15 years of of warming under business as usual climate change sort of situation. So it's a significant effect, and of course nobody lives in an average temperature. So over land surfaces, over where we grow a lot of food, etc., there could be huge problems, right, with that
Right.
type of temperature rise in a short period of time. We are already seeing droughts and changes in the hydrological cycle and everything else. So it doesn't help the situation at all.
Yeah, definitely. It does not. Jay Ackert is asking, does Paul look at supply chain information, any options and or points of concern?
Well, in terms of supply chains,
Opinions, options, sorry.
yeah, I mean, we're, globalization, the globalization model is clearly makes us less resilient, because in the ideal model, you end up, instead of producing an object or a product, at many locations around the planet, which gives you resilience. In the globalization model, it all goes to the cheapest place, cheapest labor, the place that can mass produce it, and then they wipe out all the competition. So in other words, all this device or whatever, this object or product is produced only one location, and then we're very susceptible to that plant having a flood or taken offline for some reason. And the virus shuttering it means that the transportation networks are severely constrained. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're basically paying the piper now for all of these things that we've done without any foresight.
Right. Yeah, and I've pushed for a long time to try to localize our food
Right.
chain, localize everything, because of, for one, all the damage it does on the environment, the transportation system does on the environment. But all of our food, not all of our food, but a lot of our food is concentrated. A lot of our products are concentrated in other countries, where it's going to be a problem. And then stack on top of that the natural disasters that are increasing, every year. So what do you think, like the overall, where does the COVID virus rate as far as a threat to, number one, we'll start with the human race, but number two, the planet overall and biodiversity?
Well, the viruses have always been around. There's always been a risk of catching it. People are comparing this one to 1918, the so-called Spanish flu, which had nothing to do with Spain. The only reason it's called the Spanish flu is because Spain was neutral in World War I, and information flowed freely. People in the trenches on both sides, Germany, the US, the British, both sides of the war were dying in droves, and then also in troop ships. And but they hid their numbers, because you don't want to tell the enemy that you've lost a third of your troops on the troop ship from a virus, right? So the information was really hid. And I think historians need to look back at that time, because I believe that the pandemic, the Spanish, so-called Spanish flu, I believe it ended World War I. And you don't read that in the history books anywhere, but it wiped out so many people on both sides that both sides just lost the will to fight. I mean, why be in your trench killing other people in their trenches when you're being wiped out by an unseen virus, right, on both sides? So it took away the stomach to fight. But as far as this virus is extremely serious. Unfortunately, I think the policies and the lack of testing and so on in the U.S. has jeopardized the U.S. a lot more than many other countries. And so. And unfortunately, one of the videos I just put out a video about Canada, and we just had our March break in Canada, and you had it's the spring breakers, they go to Florida, and 1 million Canadians were in the U.S. and crossed back into Canada between March 10th and in the last week or so. 1 million Canadians, many from Florida. Many of them, of course, are asymptomatic and carriers. And in Italy, what happened is they had the Chinese New Year, and in Italy, there's actually 330,000 Chinese people living in Italy. About 60,000 of them are working in the so-called luxury clothing market, as I explained in my latest video. And many of them went to China for the Chinese New Year and then back to Italy to work, carrying the virus, not having symptoms, but carrying the virus. This is why it took off so much in Italy. And that was 60,000 people. So now we're talking about 1 million people that have come back to Canada from the US. And, I think many of them are carriers. So I think it's going to really stress our health system here in the next 2 weeks. Hope I'm wrong on that. But, the problem is if your health system stays functioning, the mortality rate, the death rate is very low. Right? It's still much higher than the flu, at least 10, 20 times higher than the normal flu. But if you overwhelm the hospitals, then first of all, most of the severe cases, which is about 20% are more severe. Maybe 5% people that you need the intensive care unit and ventilators and stuff. So you would expect those people aren't going to get what they need, and 5%, there'll be a 5% mortality rate from that. Now you have to look at the people that in critical care normally in the system that don't have anything to do with the coronavirus. Those people won't get the care they need either. So maybe add another 5%. So when the hospitals get overwhelmed, I can see the death rate going to between 5 and 10%, maybe 10% even in the US.
I can totally see that.
And,
go ahead and show those charts, Oz, while we're talking. Go ahead and show those updates on the numbers, and we can continue talking over it.
Yeah, I mean, look at the numbers in Italy. Look at the enormous death rate there. And people say, well, it's this is partly to do with the society, the openness and friendliness of Italians. I mean, there's a joke that's going around that says, the biggest concern that the Italians have is that because of the quarantine, they have to sleep with their spouses now.
Oh, God.
Right? So
yeah, that's insane. I mean, it is kind of hard. Suddenly you're spending time with the people you live in the same house with.
So, but the 1918 Spanish influenza, it's at least 50 million people, maybe 100 million, maybe 150 million. I mean, those are the type of numbers I think we're looking at the moment with this virus, unless more and more countries clamp down and completely, the best paper I would recommend, and I will be doing a video in a few, shortly after I get off this call, is an article called, the author, Thomas Payer, I think, I could have the name wrong. He wrote an article a week or so ago called Coronavirus, Why You Must Act Now. And he did a follow-up, and it's called Coronavirus, the Hammer and the Dance.
Yeah, okay? I watched your video on that. It's very good.
Yeah. I'm going to do a video specifically just on that exact article to stress the key points. And the key points is you basically have to shut down, take extreme measures now. You got to kill that exponential growth. And once you do that, once you get what you're doing with all these measures is you're reducing the R value, the number of people that each carrier spreads to.
Right. The R naught value. Yeah.
I mean, the R value is about 2.4, people say. So, so you shut schools, universities, maybe go down to 2.2, shut other stuff, go to 2.1. You bring that to below 1. And then within weeks, the number of cases can taper off. But it does take weeks. The numbers keep going up while you have your actions in place because there's a lag. And this was shown very clearly in China. And it is showing very clearly in Italy because the numbers are starting to taper off.
Yeah, there's a 14-day lag. So even after, you're going to continue to increase. So
this is the hammer part. And then once you get the cases dropping off, you can slowly start opening different parts of your economy, keeping social distances. I prefer physical distancing in place. Mm-hmm. And if the number goes above 1, the cases start accelerating and then you shutter things down again. So you're basically playing a dance, and that gives time. It buys you time, and time is crucial for coming up with a vaccine. Perhaps it's crucial for allowing you to improve your treatment processes, allowing the hospitals to stay functioning, to provide the care that the seriously ill people need, both with the coronavirus, but also with other things that critical care patients have. So these numbers are they're exponentially rising. I mean, the growth rate, in a place like New York we're almost getting a doubling of infections each day. I mean, it's just like we're talking exponential growth. People really don't understand exponential growth. So if Trump was for him to be, he's just blowing smoke out of his ears when he talks about a specific date. It depends on what's happening, and if he opens everything up now, that's going to be alone responsible for millions of deaths in the U.S. There's no question about that.
I agree 100%. And a lot of states here aren't taking it serious. I'm in Utah. 1,500 missionaries came home from all places overseas from, Mormon. I'm in Mormon country here. And they had a big party at the airport welcoming back all these missionaries that were supposed to be self-quarantining when they got back. And instead, they were there hugging and kissing all their family and friends in the airport, having this huge gathering of people. I mean, no one's taking this seriously. And on top of that, our governor, who has been totally MIA, he doesn't come on television every day and tell us the status of the situation or anything. I think they're kind of, sorry, I get out of breath. They're kind of hiding the numbers, like they're just minimizing them. And he's telling the theaters to reopen. He's like, we need to reopen the theaters. You can take precautions and keep the theaters open. And are you serious? Are you serious?
Yeah, I know. When the body bags start piling up and piling up and piling up, and
then maybe they'll take it serious at that point.
But I mean, by then it's like you just have to hope that there's enough of the population get some sort of immunity, that you can produce enough medical equipment to, I mean, there's no way enough can be produced to save everybody. Like we're talking about, even in the best case, it looks like the hospital will be overwhelmed by a factor of about 10. In the best possible case, there'll be 10 times as many patients as there is equipment to save them. So the mortality is going to be large. In the worst case, we're talking about, huge numbers. We're talking about, 10, 15 million deaths in the U.S. easily.
Easily. And because we aren't taking any precautions, and actually it's kind of discouraged to wear masks. They discourage you to wear them. They say keep them for the medical professionals and they won't help you anyway, which is ridiculous. It will help you.
I mean, masks, but I mean, I encourage people to go online and get their homemade masks. And I think one of the things that you haven't heard anywhere, but I'm saying it now, is one of the reasons I believe that the masks are so effective is because when you're breathing in a mask, it's heating the air, so that when you're breathing air through the mask, it's actually higher temperature. So it's not just the filtering of the mask, but it's at the higher temperature. One of the reasons why there's a flu season, why people get it in the winter and not in the summer, is because they're inhaling colder air. So the virus can be dormant in the upper respiratory system. And when you get that temperature change to colder air, it can stimulate, the virus can be activated. This is with the yearly flu viruses, but the coronavirus is probably going to behave this in a similar way. I'll be doing another video on this very crucial paper that was published in 2015, because it's been a bit of a mystery to virologists and immunologists as to why there's a seasonal cycle with so many of these things. For this paper, I came across, I did a few videos about this a week or so ago, but I came across a new paper, new for me, that was published in 2015, and it has a perfect explanation. I think it's correct. So it will, it does tell you. So, going in a hot sauna, if you start feeling ill, I'd highly recommend going into the bathroom and running the shower and having all the windows closed and creating a steam bath in there, and stay in there for an hour or more. breathe all that steam, humid, hot, steamy air. And I think that does a lot at relieving your symptoms and perhaps bring you back to some sort of healthy state. If you have access to a sauna, it's even better.
That's and yeah, they used to tell us to do that when our kids had, you know, the cough, what they call that. I don't know. Yeah. When kids got that really bad cough, I don't remember. It's been too long ago since my kids are little.
Rhinovirus you're probably talking about. But anyway, you know, people need to, there's a saying which I really like, you know, the serenity prayer, I guess, or it doesn't have to be a prayer, but the serenity saying, you know, and it goes like, you know, if you invoke the religious part, you say, please God at the beginning, but, you know, you don't have to. You could, it's give me the serenity to accept the things I can't change, the courage to change the things I can change, and the wisdom to know the difference.
I love that saying, except for the God part, but you know.
Yeah. So, you know, have the dear God in there or not, depending on your point of view, your beliefs. But the point is, we don't have, one of the reasons for all of this stress and stuff right now is people don't have that feeling of control over what's happening. And what we can control is our own health right now. We can control what we need to try to do as individuals is to boost our immune systems and to get as healthy as possible so that if infections come our way, there is a threshold with this virus, like all viruses. So you get some of these virus particles, your immune system can build antibodies and fight it off. I'm sure if the number of virus particles crosses a threshold, then you can get sick and the illness. So the idea is to try to raise that threshold as much as possible by boosting your immune system. So, you know, I take vitamins. I'm outside about half the day these days, you know, especially on a sunny day. I'll go in the sun, I'll go for walks. I've taken up jogging outside. There's very few people outside. You know, the message from governments are stay inside. But the message should really be don't go near any people, right? So stay that separation. So if everybody's holed up inside their houses, why wouldn't I be outside getting the fresh air, doing my walks, doing whatever, but making sure I'm not near anybody, right? Like catching that sunlight. And, you know, I mean, if I'm not going to make it in, you know, the next month or something, I'd rather enjoy the natural outdoors.
Right, the vitamin D helps that you get from the sun as well.
Yeah, vitamin D.
I'd like to point that out.
Also taking vitamins, taking vitamin C. You know, zinc is supposed to be good. Beta carotene, all of these different things. Eating healthy, getting enough sleep. So, yeah, I mean, it's a challenge, but you know, it's very important from an individual point of view. It's crucial. So, one of the videos I'll do later is a rant video from outside. But I'm also going to talk about this study with the idea of the seasonality, because I think it hits the point. So the seasonality alone will not bring the R0 below 1 from 2.4, but with the social distancing, things shutting down, staying away from people, all these things incrementally bring down that R. You know, R0 is the initial R, or the initial spreading, but you know, over time, so R0 is time equals 0, right? That's the initial number. And then all of these actions that governments take can lower it, and you want to push it below 1, like I said. So the hammer in the dance explains it very well.
Yeah, definitely go back and watch that video, and I guess you're going to expand more on that. So
yeah, I'm going to do a whole video on that later today, and also I think I need to do one on the exponential function, because people just don't understand exponential growth.
It's a hard thing for people to comprehend.
Yeah. Yes, it is. What I like to say is we're undergoing, I call it coronavirus time compression. Like, I don't know about you, but a week ago, you know, with what we're undergoing with the, you know, growth rates of the coronavirus, et cetera, a week ago seems more like a year ago to me, and 2 weeks ago seems like several years ago. You know what I mean? in
Yeah,
terms of, I mean, things are happening so quickly. There's so much going on and so much happening, in a short period of time. It's almost like, time is being compressed or something.
it feels that way to me for
Yeah, yeah,
sure, for
it
sure.
definitely does. Like, think about what you did, a month ago, and that seems like a lifetime ago almost.
Yeah, it does. It was a totally different lifetime.
Yeah, so
That's how
it's our
it
perception
feels.
of time. Yeah.
Everything has changed. Everything has changed. We're living in complete chaos. I did want to move to the environmental side of how the coronavirus affects the environment. And I did have a question from CB that pertains to that. And he's like, does it look, wait, he was talking about the ice. CB said how little ice should be expected this summer in August.
Yeah, so a little bit about the Arctic sea ice, and I will, focus. I feel there's a huge urgency, so I'm addressing a lot of the coronavirus stuff in my videos, but I haven't forgotten I'm primarily abrupt climate change, and there's a huge link. Of course, I've talked about the dimming, but there's also, we can expect more viruses in a warming world. There's no question. There's all kinds of disease vectors. Animals are migrating towards the poles, et cetera, et cetera. But as far as the sea ice goes, we reached a peak. We reached a maximum of sea ice. It's generally about mid-March. We reached it early this year. It was March 3rd. And since then, we've had quite a bit of drop in the sea ice. In fact, we've had a couple of days that are over the century, they call it. We lost 150,000 square kilometers of ice in one day, just today or yesterday rather. And, the last 2 or 3 days, we've had significant losses. You can see a sharp downtick. And this, it's way too early to tell, but the Arctic has been extremely warm. Many other parts of the globe, Europe, look at the temperatures over Europe and over Russia and Siberian places. I mean, just incredibly high temperatures. Some people have thought, well, maybe that's partly because of the lowered aerosols, right? You can look at the location of the jet stream and see why, we're getting this warm air going so far north and so on. So, it's many papers will analyze this in the next little while, but I think I can talk about what the results that I would expect. So it's going to be I think it's going to be a very strong melt year, but that remains to be seen for sure. I mean, it's very hard to predict one year. The trends. We're going to zero very, very soon, but whether it happens this year or in 5 years or 3 years or whatever, it's very difficult to predict.
Right. Because that's like a minute in the planetary times. It's like, yes, you can go a decade and that's like a minute. So predicting within a decade is really, really difficult. Exactly when is my guess. Torstein going south says, hi, Paul. Have you seen updated coal use and other stats for China? Because some say workers there aren't willing to go back to work yet.
Yes, I did some videos on China, and there was a very good article from Climate Central that talked about the 25% reduction of Chinese industry and the 25% reduction of CO2 emissions. It was 100 megaton for 2 weeks, and that became 200 megatons for adding another week or two on. And there was lots of charts and data, but I'd like to see a follow-up article from them. I haven't yet to see whether people are actually going back. I think, this is a dance part, because if you haven't built up enough immunity within the population, then if you get people, interacting and going back to a normal schedules, then you're likely to start getting a large rise in cases again, and then you'd have to shutter things down. So it's a very delicate balance as to how quickly you go back. And I think the Chinese government recognizes that, but there are a lot of people that they don't trust the government. Both there, we have that here, we have that everywhere now, and lots of people are reluctant to go back. So, but one of the things that you can look at is if you monitor the nitrous oxide emissions, and there's lots of articles that are coming out now. Showing the satellite data from the nitrogen dioxide, the NO2, and also the nitrous oxide. And that's a good indicator of how much industry is shutting down in different places, and whether China or not is increasing. So it's still a bit of an open question, because they do risk a resurgence. As long as you keep the R number less than 1, the virus isn't going to pop up. But the virus is there; it's in people. And if you get people, too much contact and so on, then it can spring up again.
Right. I agree. I think you're dead on there. Ecos of Not says, do you think the actual numbers are closer to 10 times the official numbers for the infected?
In China, yeah, I think definitely, if you go and look at the coronavirus, Why You Must Act Now, if you Google that title, look at that paper, which is the predecessor of the one on the hammer and the dance. That paper talks about the concept of true cases. So you don't, unless you're sampling the entire population, you have to make estimates on what the true number of cases is. You measure cases, but you don't know what the true number is. So they work backwards to figure out the number of true cases. So when China went into lockdown in Wuhan and surrounding areas, they had 400 people that tested positive, and it was estimated there were at least 1,500 people or more with true cases. And then when their numbers went up to, that was when it was 100. When there was 100 cases, they thought there were 1,500. So 15 times more than the monitored people. And then when it was 400 measured cases, they thought maybe 2,500 people had it, and they went into lockdown at that point. And the actions that they took: building field hospitals, spraying the streets, everybody wearing the masks, and complete isolation, in the communist system. So, in South Korea, they were ready for it. They lived through SARS. They said never again, and they just did testing galore. What we really need, what will almost be more crucial than testing for the virus itself, is testing for antibodies in people. So you do serological, they call it, blood work. So you test the blood and you look for antibodies in the blood that are specific to the coronavirus. So you want to see, now if a person gets infected and then recovers, they have antibodies built up. So you measure how many people in the population have these antibodies. And when you get enough people in the population with these antibodies, then the virus will start tapering off.
That's when you have herd immunity, and it has to be like 80%, exactly. Right?
Now that test is very simple to do. It's just a prick of your finger with a pin, a little bit of blood. They do the test. They should get very, very quick results. They need to start testing that. That's as important as testing the people that have the virus itself as well.
That makes sense to me, because, people could be going back to work and doing their thing if they are already immune to it. So there's definitely that. I'll read Jilly's comment. Yeah. Jilly Love 101. War continues when all efforts should be focused on environmental restoration and curbing the pandemic. I agree with you, Jilly. I'm sure Paul agrees with that too. How could you not? And then I just have another comment. Do you agree with, how could you not agree with that, right?
Yeah. And that's, there's so many different parallels to climate and what's happening, but climate's not happening. The coronavirus, we need to talk about coronavirus time, right? The exponential function. I think by April 1st, one projection was 1 million cases in the US. And by, Trump's date of April 12th, Easter, 5 million cases or 10 million cases, right? We just unless these rates are slowed down, this is going to continue happening, and it's going to completely overwhelm systems. It is already starting to overwhelm systems, I believe, in a place like New York, for example.
Yeah, and they're not, New York is doing everything they can, but they only have so much power as a state, and people are going from New York and infecting all other states. They're just spilling out from New York.
Yeah, exactly. So I've been on a very steep learning curve with this virus and virology stuff. I find it fascinating. I'm actually going to look. I'm actually going to look into. I'll let people know if I find it. One of these massively open online courses, or Coursera or something, to take microbiology or immunology or virology, some courses online. I mean, they're free for the most part, and right now I just read the literature and just learn what I can, and it's a very steep learning curve, but there's lots of questions, and there's also I'm trying to think of different ideas that an individual can protect themselves from getting the virus, or
that would be
to
nice.
minimize it.
Especially when you're immunocompromised like myself. But
yeah, well, I have a lot of different ideas on that, and I'm ordering some parts today to put together some things to try, some prototypes, and I will tell people exactly what I'm doing soon. I just have to think. I had this crazy idea a few nights
with the
ago.
soap and the
well, no, that's no good. That doesn't work. Stay away from that.
That was funny though. It was cute.
Yeah. No, it doesn't work. It does the opposite. Unfortunately, there's lots of cells in the respiratory system and lungs that have lipids, and it will do more harm. And soap in your eye irritates. And no, it's not. This is no. I mean, it's to do with using the seasonality effect, which is we don't get the viruses in the summer because our nasal passages and our mouth, we're breathing in warm air, and there's not a huge temperature gradient.
And more dry air too, right? Humidity matters.
Well, it might be more humid in the summer. It'll be more humid in the summer because when you're indoors in winter, it's going to be very dry. But it's that temperature change when the weather changes, and when the temperature drops all of a sudden, then you get these these flu viruses that are inactive in your system. They become alive. They start multiplying. So I think so. If we could figure out a simple way to maintain decent temperatures, in the system, in your upper respiratory system during the winter. Or during just as a way to prevent the infection from taking root there to begin with, I think it would be a very possible way to minimize your risk. So I've got some different ideas, and I've ordered some parts to try to put together a prototype, and I'll talk to some medical people and I already am talking to some to figure out what to do about this, because people used to think there's an old wives' tale, I guess, or old man's tale, old husband's tale, that you don't get colds by going outside in the cold, right?
Right.
That doesn't do anything, but that
does cause you to get pneumonia if you're already sick.
Yeah, there were some studies in the 50s and 60s that seemed to indicate that, but those studies were deeply flawed, and it turns out, as I will explain in this paper in this video later, that it's that temperature change that really gets you.
That makes sense, because horses, it doesn't matter. Okay, I'm a horse person. Horses are really sensitive to weather changes. Yeah. They can adapt to hotter weather, they can adapt to colder weather, but whenever there's a drastic change, they're super sensitive to it, and they can get colic, which is pretty much a stomach. Yeah. Anything that has to do with the stomach is colic, but it can be deadly. It's very deadly. It's common cause of their death. So that makes a lot of sense to me, being a horse person and all. But let's move on to talking about animals while there's a quick blip. And I really want to get to the biodiversity.
Right. Yes.
Just because I think there may be positive effects of the virus as far as biodiversity loss maybe being reduced, but also there are other effects like spraying disinfectants all over the streets and everywhere, getting that into the atmosphere. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, see, as we learn, we don't know much about this virus still. It's still like we're rapidly trying to learn what we can. Some of the studies, for example, most surprising are Okay, the thing can live for 17 days on hard surfaces on a cruise ship, right? Metal surfaces. It can live for 3 hours in the air on air droplets. We're finding out a lot of things which are very concerning. I mean, I haven't been able to find out what the threshold is, like how many actual virus particles. I mean, you can't say the virus it's just material that are fit together in a certain way. Like you can't say it's live or anything. It's not living, but so we can talk about virus particles, and I think they call them virions or something. So I call them just virus particles, but there is a technical name in the jargon, for virologists, microbiologists, virions or virions. So anyway, how many are required to make somebody sick? And I think that varies a lot. That will vary an awful lot depending on the immunity of the person, depending on a lot of different factors like temperature and humidity and all of these other factors. Those things also affect how long the virus can live on a surface. So there was an AccuWeather report just yesterday that said that, right now we're in the shoulder season. As we go into summer, the UV levels will increase by a factor of 10. So the virus will not be able to live on surfaces outside. It'll be killed very quickly by the higher humidity, the higher temperatures, and the ultraviolet, right? But the thing is, there's so much that the R number is so high, it won't be lowered to below 1 just by those factors alone. It'll be lowered to 1. Those factors will help, but we need to do the social distancing, shut things down. And people say, well, how long do you have to shut things down? And, the hammer and the dance, it talks about 3 to 7 weeks for things to be shut down, and then everything's back under control, and then you slowly open things up and you monitor. You need testing, like copious amounts of testing,
Right.
both and also the test. I've heard of some cases where a person tests negative, then they test positive, then they tested negative again a couple of times and positive again. So what that tells me is that the test has a certain sensitivity and can measure, presence of the virus in the person's body above a certain threshold, whatever that threshold is for the test, and that people can actually, be below that threshold or right near that threshold. So that's why their test would oscillate between positive and negative. And also that threshold, how does that relate to the threshold that is required for somebody to get sick?
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I heard you talking about that in one of your videos. That's important to know this information. I mean,
so I'm trying to. I haven't seen much. I've gone through the literature and haven't seen much on that. So I don't know if we know exactly. I mean, we know with other viruses. The other thing is just today there was a paper about the melting glaciers in Tibet, how they're exposing lots of viruses that have been dormant in the ice. Also those in Antarctica and those in the Arctic. And another thing that is crucial is, when I went to the climate conference in Madrid, Spain, after I was in Spain for 3 or 4 days, I got extremely sick. I had these symptoms that were, I had gastrointestinal problems that were worse than I can remember ever having. And I actually missed the first day of the COP, but then I just went and I seemed to get better quickly once I was moving around and about and doing things. But a number of Italian doctors are reporting that lots of people there were reporting various sicknesses back in the November, December timeframe. And, it's not clear that those maybe weren't some early strain of the virus, or it was around for a long time before we even detected it, et cetera. So
that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of detective work that needs to be done. And I'd actually like to get tested just to see if I carry any of those antibodies, I'm talking about. I mean, the antibody test is going to be more important than the actual test.
I kind of agree with you. When that it would detect it whether or not you're symptomatic or not, right?
Yes, exactly.
So yeah, whatever.
I mean, it'd be
Okay.
nice to know. I mean, many of us may have some sort of low-level immunity already and not know about it, right? In which case, the some of the models of how bad things will get may not pan out. Things might not be as bad as we think if many people are already immune. We just don't know. We don't know any of these things yet.
Well, we don't know can hurt us. So, okay. Torstein going south says the UN says mosquitoes cannot spread COVID. Your comment on that?
Yeah,
it's not spread through blood, right? It's spread
it's not spread through blood. It's not the term would be I mean, blood. We talk about serum, serological, and things. Like I say, I'm a newbie at virology, but I'm learning quickly. But I mean, malaria. Things like malaria have been spread by mosquitoes. I did a bunch of videos on sort of the history of pandemics and different types of pandemics and things. And I was at a garage sale many months ago, and I bought this used book. It's probably even years ago, and it's all about pandemics and viruses. It goes through the history. It's well illustrated, an excellent book. And it just so happened I happened to see it on the shelf. I'd forgotten I'd actually even purchased it. And, because of the anniversary of the 2018 Spanish influenza book, there are quite a few decent books that were published a few years ago, for the 100th anniversary of that particular outbreak. So, people say we were overdue. We were long overdue for this sort of thing. But climate change, what climate change kind of sets up the conditions that make it favorable for viruses to take off. Like, because one of the obvious things is that it forces animals to migrate towards the pole to get more favorable temperature and precipitation conditions, which then set up the plant life. And so animals are migrating to regions where they didn't hang out before, and they're intersecting and interacting with other species that are already there, and that seems like an important factor in increasing the risk of these types of viruses spreading from one species to another species.
That totally makes sense, because they wouldn't have immunity in a new environment.
Yes,
right?
yes, exactly.
And, there's that. And then we got to get to the permafrost before we're done, and we're getting really close to the end of the hour. And I try to keep it to an hour because I know your time is very valuable. Human wants to ask this question real quick, and then let's get back to the permafrost and releasing diseases. Does radioactive particles from 3 meltdowns at Fukushima affect the atmosphere?
Well, it's a different thing from the viruses for sure. It's not related to the present outbreak or things like that. But radiation can cause mutation, right? We know that. Even solar radiation can cause ultraviolet. It can cause mutations in cells, radiation high enough levels can also cause mutations. So it throws it's a good question. It needs to be looked at in more detail whether it can be cause mutations, but the mutations generally it causes damage and it kills cells as opposed to causing just straight mutation. So I don't know, but I doubt it. I doubt it has a big impact.
Okay, all right, now let's move on back to the permafrost. I know you talk about it all the time, about the permafrost releasing all kinds of viruses that we have no immunity to. And I just have this total layman, I don't know anything. Is it possible that this virus, the coronavirus, came from the permafrost? Is that out there way too far? Because the first people they traced with it said that, or had no connection with the outdoor market in China. So I'm just wondering, is that out there? Is that crazy?
Well, I wouldn't take anything off the table at this stage, really. If the virus, I think that the, I think that the virus was around in some strain or some fashion before the Chinese outbreak. like I said that, I think it may have been in, it's some Italian doctors are reporting people. I read recently a paper that said one of the symptoms of the virus could be what medical people call anorexia. I'm not talking about anorexia nervosa. I'm talking about and the term anorexia.
Loss of appetite.
Yeah, loss of appetite, no desire to eat. I had that for sure, and huge amounts of like diarrhea, like unbelievable diarrhea, like just no, like the worst you could imagine.
That sounds like all the symptoms.
Yeah. So so it's like go out and buy new underwear every week sort of idea if you want to go outside. Like people were reporting that, lots of people were reporting that, according to the Italian doctor he's an expert. I don't remember his name. I'm not great with names, but Renzetta or anyway, he wrote a paper in Nature recently about this, and there were a lot of reports of people having these really intense illnesses back in November and December. And, that's why I think it's crucial that we get antibodies tested. I'd like to know if I'm immune. If I'm immune, I can go volunteer at the local, testing center, right? Without
that
fear
makes
getting
absolute
sick.
sense. Yeah.
Right. So, I'd really like to know, but tests are hard to get right at the moment.
Yes, they are. I was so shocked when they actually gave me a test, because I've called in before and they're like, do you have a direct contact with someone who's confirmed, or have you been overseas? No.
Yeah.
Then sorry, we can give you a flu test. We can give you a strep test. And when I know it's not flu and I know it's not strep, that makes it kind of ridiculous to go in and pay for a test that I don't need.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but anyway, I did get tested. Now my brother just got tested today, and my sister-in-law, but they're backlogged on the tests here. I don't know how you stand in Canada, but they're possibly the test may be invalid by the time they're able to. They don't have the materials to process the sample, from what I understand.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they can't keep the sample for forever because it would degrade and maybe go neutral or something and test negative, when if it was tested right away, it could be positive. Things like that. Again, it depends on the threshold. I know there is a company in Ottawa called Spartan Biosciences, and they're working on a portable test that would give you almost instant results.
Wouldn't that be great?
How along they are with that. There's also a couple things, like people are being innovative. I mean, a doctor, I believe, connected with McMaster University in Hamilton, my old university. He just hooked up one ventilator with tubing to basically be able to be used for 9 different people, just by adding tubing. So one ventilator could cover 9 people or 10 people.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
Right. There's all kinds of innovations like that we need. We need desperately. Lots of people are looking at ways to, at these sort of things. And also, one of the things that's important is that generally there's a trade-off between the virility, or how severe the virus is, how harmful it is to the body, and the spreading. Generally, if the spreading rate is huge, it will be less virulent, less severe. And if the spreading rate is slow, then it will be more virulent, and then it won't spread as quickly, because if the virus makes a person sick right away, then they're hospitalized or not able to spread to other people. So over time, I mean, because this thing, reproduces so quickly, sheds cells so quickly, it's always changing a certain amount. But people think, that it won't change enough. So if a vaccine is developed, it will be valid for many, many years. It won't be like just the flu virus, where you need a different vaccine every single year, the normal flu. And also, evolution of the virus tends to make them weaker over time, not stronger. Of course, there can be exceptions. So, some people worry about it getting more and more severe, but it's actually the overwhelming of hospital systems that will greatly increase the death rate, not any change in the virility of the virulent capability of the virus.
Yeah,
I'm starting to sound like a virologist already.
I know.
I encourage everybody to check everything I say on viruses, and correct me if possible, if I'm inaccurate.
I always love corrections if I'm wrong on something. Please tell me if I'm wrong.
Yes, it's learning. It's a learning curve.
It absolutely is. Okay, so We are towards it's now but an hour. Would you just try to just quickly, let's end with what do you think is, not counting people, the effect of the virus has on the environment? Is it a overall win for the environment, or is it an overall loss, not including people? I know we are human. We're going to talk about the human life, but I'm a little concerned about the rest of the planet as well. So
many people, I guess, are starting to think that humans are the virus and the virus is the solution.
There's that.
I wouldn't go to say that, but
it's not going to kill 250,000 people a day, though. And that's how many new births there are. So,
but I mean, the virus is making us, rethink, the way we do everything and how we deal with risk, and hopefully, the thinking people among us at least is getting us to think about that. There's other, I'm not including politicians in this category. We have to change the way we do things in our society. That's been clear for many, many years, and the virus is it's concentrating a lot of us. It's making people appreciate life more, for one thing, and live day to day. And I highly encourage everybody to use this as an opportunity with the isolation and stuff to get in good physical shape and get exercise, and spend you're forced to spend time with people, and not feel sorry for yourself, and take your vitamins and get proper sleep and eat properly, and use this as an experience. Use this as a sort of downtime, enforced downtime, to do all the things that you meant to do in the last number of years but never got around to doing. So with me, I got a fitness tracking device, and now I really notice a big difference. I've already lowered my resting heart rate about 5 beats per minute in the last 3 weeks, and I've lost weight, and I feel a lot more energy, and there's a lot of positive things personally for me that are happening because of this crisis that we're in. So
okay, great. All right. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wanted to make clear, or upcoming projects?
Encourage people. Most people as you said, they know who I am, but check out my website, paulbeckwith.net, if you haven't, and certainly watch the videos I'll be posting today.
And donate to his work, please.
Yes, that's always helpful too. Yeah.
Always. We really appreciate you, Paul. I am just really honored that you came on today, and I hope we were able to get some really good information out, and hopefully more people go to your YouTube channel and your website just to keep up with what's going on with everything in the environment in the world. Thank you, guys. I would say hello to everybody, but there's so many, and it would take another 15 minutes. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate you being here and joining me with Paul Beckwith. All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Paul.
Take care, everybody.
Have a good one.
Okay. Goodbye.
Goodbye. We're going to do the outgo.